It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Without further ado, here's our fearless host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I want to welcome you to this episode, especially because this episode is really an episode of thanks and gratitude. And I'm recording this a few days before Christmas. It will come out the week of Christmas. And so for those of you that are on the road listening to this, I really appreciate it. I am trying to reflect on the year that has been 2024 here in Northwest Arkansas. This podcast, for those of you that are just tuning into it today for the first time, is about the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life here in the Ozarks. And I got to say that over the last 5+ years, it has been nothing short of an amazing journey, meeting so many people, making so many friends, telling so many stories. And it goes without saying that I have so much as an independent podcast producer to be thankful for. And the thing that I think about the most is you. I think about all of the people that listen to this podcast, all of the people that send me text messages, send me emails, tell me how much this podcast means to them, to just say, hey, I really appreciated you telling that story about fill in the blank organization. It really made a difference for me. I had no idea they were doing that kind of work here in our community. I hear those refrains over and over again. And so it's simply a reminder to me of how important storytelling is. It's also a reminder to me of how important it is for all of us, no matter what. Every one of us has a platform of sorts. This is my platform, the podcast. All of us has a need to share our platform with other people. I know I do, and that's why I bring people on to this podcast. And so I really wanted to just do a monologue today, something a little different than what I normally do, something a little different than what you're accustomed to. But I'm going to keep it short and sweet because I know you want to get back to your gingerbread latte or that amazing pumpkin pie that your grandmother made, or I don't know, fill in the blank favorite food that you enjoy eating during the holiday season guilt-free, right? Because we should all have those guilt-free moments. So anyway, I digress. But I appreciate each and every one of you that listen to this podcast. And I wanted to just highlight some of the things that really stood out to me this year. And if I don't mention you, please know I appreciate you still. It doesn't change anything. But I had to cut down this outline. Otherwise, this thing was going to go on and on. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the key themes and episodes from 2024, from community impact and transformation, addressing food insecurity, homelessness and community efforts, sustainability and energy efficiency, culture, history, and community life here in Northwest Arkansas. And of course, how could we forget the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Northwest Arkansas, kind of the foundation of things. So really excited to kind of talk about that. So I wanted to first highlight, recently I had an episode with Sean Schwartzman from Potter's House, and we had a chance to feature their work in transforming lives through the thrift stores, community programs, and relationship building. And more importantly, the work that's going to continue to happen through their new project, the Jefferson Renewal Project. They are making a significant impact here in Northwest Arkansas. They have figured out a way to take upcycling to a whole new level. If you've never been to the Potter's House, I mean, if Goodwill was to have had a baby, it would have been the Potter's House. And there's one in Siloam. There's one in Springdale. There's one in Fayetteville. I certainly want to encourage you to check out Potter's House when you can and support the efforts that those guys are doing over there. Another thing that we had a chance to talk about, which is something that's really near and dear to my heart. I'm on the board of Ozarks Natural Foods. Some of you may know that. Some of you may not know that. But food insecurity is a real thing here in Northwest Arkansas. And we're trying to fight it to the best of our ability. And I've had the opportunity to talk with a number of different organizations here in Northwest Arkansas that are trying to fight food insecurity, trying to make the healthiest food available to you. We've got to stop eating processed food. Let me say that for the folks in the back. We have to stop eating processed food. We need to eat healthy food. And I know some of you are like, well, that's easy for you to say, Randy, but a lot of us can't afford anything but processed food. And I understand that. But I do know that there are several organizations in Northwest Arkansas that are working hard, including the Northwest Arkansas Food Bank, including the folks that I've connected with through Neighborly Food Co. and Brett Raymond, who's doing an amazing job with his company. And they have another organization, Pack Shack, where they are feeding millions of people healthy food, sustainable food, natural food, things that you can look at and identify, not FD&C red number 3 and yellow number 5 and all this other craziness, things that we just need to get out of our diets. But I digress. You get the point of what I'm saying about healthy eating and the fact that food insecurity is a problem here in Northwest Arkansas, even though we live in probably the richest area of our state. We have major challenges, and there's a lot of inequities when it comes to food insecurity. And so we're focusing on that just like anybody else is in any state across this great country. But I think specifically here in Northwest Arkansas, we have a chance to do some special things. And I'm going to talk about some of the organizations that I work with. And of course, I mentioned Ozarks Natural Foods, the co-op, the only food co-op in the state of Arkansas. They're doing some amazing work. And I was reminded today as I attended a Creative Mornings event of how important it is to really project hope and possibility. And I believe that organizations like the co-op are doing that on a regular basis. They do so much behind the scenes of feeding people, of making sure that organizations like St. James Food Pantry and the amazing work that Monique Jones is doing, making sure that they have what they need, supporting great people like the folks at Secondhand Smoke and Nate Walls, and just an individual that is literally plate by plate trying to feed all of those in Northwest Arkansas that need a healthy meal. But it goes without saying that I'm thankful that I've had a chance to talk about the food insecurity issues that exist here in Northwest Arkansas, because a lot of times when I originally created this podcast, I just wanted to focus on what made Northwest Arkansas a special place. What actually makes Northwest Arkansas a special place are the people. You make Northwest Arkansas special. And the thing about you is that a lot of folks in Northwest Arkansas understand the call and recognize the assignment. And I'm one of them. And I feel like whatever I can do to lend my platform to these important messages that serve the greater need, I'm going to do that. So you'll have to indulge me from time to time when we have these conversations. But I really appreciate Brett Raymond and the amazing work that he's doing at Neighborly Food Co. You can actually support his business, Neighborly Food Co., which is a B Corp, by buying his products at several Walmarts around this region. And he may be in some other retail outlets very soon. I know he's at Ozarks Natural Foods, but his beans and rice are simply to die for, and they're all natural and sustainable. So I certainly want to encourage you to support Brett Raymond and what he's doing. The other thing that has come up a lot lately, and I'm so thankful for the folks that I had on the podcast, is the issue of homelessness and some of the community efforts around that. The homelessness in our region is real. I lived in the Bay Area, and I saw homelessness at a whole different level. For those of you that are familiar with the Tenderloin and just some of the challenges that cities like San Francisco and LA and New York face when it comes to dealing with homelessness, we really don't want that here in Northwest Arkansas. And what I mean by that is we need to be creating as many opportunities as possible to keep people off the streets, because some people are just one paycheck away from homelessness. Some people are actually living in their cars right now, and that's a real issue. And so I I really want to encourage you to be willing to have those conversations early and often. And sometimes I think when we look at and think about Northwest Arkansas, we don't want to talk about the other side of Northwest Arkansas. But to me, I think we need to take a holistic approach, right? Because if we are as adamant about building the Greenway and as adamant about building our trail system and as adamant about building our entrepreneurial ecosystem, we need to be as adamant about taking care of our brothers and sisters that maybe don't have enough. And I always ask the question, am I my brother's keeper? Am I my sister's keeper? Yes, I am. And yes, you are. You have to be. We don't have a choice because this world sometimes can render things with punishing effect. But I think that there is always hope, and we have to have hope. And especially in this Advent season, when we talk about hope, joy, love, and peace, we need to be exhibiting these aspects on a regular basis, and we need to be giving them to other people. And part of what I'd like to do with this podcast is to provide some hope that there is a future. There are some amazing things that can happen here. So just keep that in mind. But in terms of addressing homelessness and some of the community efforts, I really appreciated having Becky Sisson, who is the executive director of Seven Hills Homeless Center, on with board member Will Roth a while back. And they shared some amazing stories about the difference that it makes for some people just to get a simple shower, to be able to get a toiletry kit, to be able to have a place to come lay your head. And we want to see, both in Washington and Benton County, more beds created, more opportunities for people to have a roof over their heads while they go through whatever they're going through. And we have a Fortune 1 company. We've got J.B. Hunt. We've got Tyson. We've got some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies in the world right here in our backyard. And so we need to lean on them and leverage all of the goodwill that comes out of those organizations as we continue to expand this service that needs to happen, especially as it pertains to homelessness. And so I really want to encourage anybody listening to get involved where and when possible. My way of getting involved, of course, is sharing my platform with Becky and Will and letting them tell their story. But I would encourage you, and we'll put a link to all of the episodes that I mentioned in this particular podcast. We'll put a link to those shows in the show notes so you can go back and listen to them at length and then confirm what I was talking about. I had a really great individual on from the STIT group, and it was, I have to say, it was a very enlightening conversation that really expanded my mindset about what is possible with a for-profit entity that is focused on making sure that every building is as energy efficient as it can be. And I had David Stitt on from the Stitt Group. He's a second-generation owner of the company, and we talked about sustainable and energy-efficient home design. It was a really good episode, and so they have such a passion for passive solar design, for net zero homes. I mean, imagine having a home that not so much is off the grid, right? But like the solar is providing enough power to provide electricity to your home. Maybe you've got some other net zero applications going on in your home. Maybe you're doing like geothermal warming where you go down into the core of the earth and you warm your home that way. There are so many ways to kind of remove yourself from and I'm using air quotes now, the grid. And I would definitely recommend that you check out that episode to learn more about the STIT Group and what they're doing and just the work that they're doing in our community to educate future generations about sustainability and in design. And it's really certainly an important conversation. When it comes to culture, history, and community life, I got to say that I recently had the author Connie Cottingham on the podcast. And Connie talked about her book, 100 Things to Do in Bentonville and Rogers Before You Die. Now, my hope and prayer is that none of you die tomorrow, or at least before you read this book, and use it as inspiration to recognize that all of the things that we have in this area of the country, but specifically in this region that we live in called Northwest Arkansas. And I always like to say my focus is always on this podcast is from Bella Vista, as if you draw a circle down to Eureka Springs and then down to like the Bobby Hopper Tunnel And I mean, I know people want to include Fort Smith, but, we're really just including that group. And then, of course, back up to Siloam and then back up to Bella Vista. And if you look at where the natural arteries are in this region and even where the new roads are going, I think it's important for us to understand that there's a lot here right in our backyard. And so Connie did a great job with her book, 100 Things to Do in Bentonville and Rogers Before You Die. And we talked about some of her favorite stories, some of her favorite things to do in this area. And so I certainly would encourage you to get that book and sit down with your family or sit down with some friends and start checking off some of those things that you could do. I mean, I'm always amazed when I talk to people that live in Fayetteville that have never been to Devil's Den. And if you don't know what Devil's Den is, you need to go check it out. It's literally just a couple of exits down I-49 from the south of town here in Fayetteville. There's a lot that you can do and check out there. And then last but not least, the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Northwest Arkansas is so great. It's so rich that there is no shortage of topics to have when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I think of all of the new podcasts that have come out, like Flavors of Northwest Arkansas and People of NWA, but definitely there are a lot more shows coming out that are highlighting all the aspects of Northwest Arkansas, but especially the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Northwest Arkansas. I want to encourage you to be supporting local businesses for sure. That's the first thing. But when it comes to specifically the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think of the folks from Freight Relay and the amazing work that they're doing with autonomous trucking and setting up scheduling so that drivers that actually do drive don't ever have to be away from home overnight, and that there are ways through algorithms and through technology to leverage a point-to-point system to allow trucks to deliver packaging so that you don't overutilize or overtax the system. The folks at JB Hunt will tell you they could always use a new truck driver, right? And it's one of the hardest jobs to fill. And organizations like Freight Relay, who's based right here in Northwest Arkansas, are really making a huge difference when it comes to that. And so I really want to encourage you to be supporting local businesses as much as possible because they do make a huge difference. And so let me grab a quick glass of water because I'm parched. But anyway, the entrepreneurial ecosystem is really important here. And I think that as we continue to grow, we're going to bring on more folks that have started small businesses that have built big businesses. I think of like Dr. Nicole Calhoun from Elixir Yoga Lab or Yoga Studios, where first of all, she is the bendiest and most flexible person I've ever seen in my life. If you ever follow her on Instagram, you'd be amazed at the things that she's able to do. And she just reminds us of the importance of mobility. But I see people coming out of that Elixir Yoga Lounge and studio, and I'm like, man, they really got to work out. But she's got a location both in Fayetteville and in Rogers. And I mean, that's just one example of a local business person that is not only supporting our community with a much needed resource, but is also providing jobs and opportunities for her employees. And it goes without saying that we need to support local businesses as much as possible. And that's why we like to feature a lot of different businesses that come on the podcast. And I'm thinking of like Ox and Tanner Green, who just recently became CEO of Ox and took over for Charu Thomas, who's now going to go on and do bigger and better things. And I think that's like the epitome of leadership when you think of it. Like I always say, your job as a leader, and this is for anybody, if you're a leader or you consider yourself a leader, your job as a leader is to work yourself out of a job. Not that anybody's getting fired, but that you're creating opportunities for people below you to step into what you do so that you can then go on and do something even more profound, right? And so a lot of times I say there's a difference. There are leaders and there are managers, and you know the difference between a real leader and a manager. And so I really want to encourage, especially those of you that are out there that are starting your businesses or running a business, be a leader. Don't be a manager. We got enough managers in the world, but we need leaders because leaders will take us from point A to point B to point C and D and on. So I just want to encourage you with that word. But yeah, I just feel like Northwest Arkansas is such fertile ground. We've said it over and over again. There's so much giving that happens in this area, and I think it's important for us to recognize that there's always going to be opportunities for growth. This is always going to be a great place, I think, to start a business and to grow a business. And so I really want to encourage you to get out there and make it happen. No matter what your age is, if you think you have an idea and you think there's a market for it, we'll support you. We'll try to make it happen. And especially for those of you that are listening to this podcast and wondering whether or not you should relocate here to Northwest Arkansas, heck yeah, you should relocate here. This place is amazing. The people are amazing. I have yet to find a more giving, a more thoughtful, a more creative place in the country like Northwest Arkansas. And I mean, I'm not blowing smoke, folks. I'm serious. And those of you that have listened to me for a long period of time, you know what I'm talking about. I have almost 350 examples and episodes of why Northwest Arkansas is so special. So I encourage you to go back and listen to them. We've got several that have listened to all those episodes. But if you haven't and you're new to the podcast, you definitely need to check it out. Anyway, all right, I want to make some acknowledgments. I want to thank some people that have really been instrumental in my life and in support of this podcast and this effort. So first, I want to thank the Northwest Arkansas Council, Nate Green and Rob Smith and Nelson Peacock and Duke McClarty and Isabel Gamara, and the list goes on and on. But I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for being a sponsor of the podcast and a contributor to the region's growth and all of the amazing stories that make Northwest Arkansas so special. If you are not connected with the Northwest Arkansas Council, don't think that it's just for organizations. It's also for you. When Sam Walton sat down with J.B. Hunt and Don Tyson and were like, hey, we need to create an organization that's going to continue to see this area be sustainable and grow. That's what the Northwest Arkansas Council is and has become. And it's a place where information flows. It's a place where we get to talk about the wins, even some of the challenges that we face. Northwest Arkansas is special, and the Northwest Arkansas Council has done an amazing job. And I'm thankful that Sam Walton had the foresight to see the need for an organization like this. And so I would encourage you to check them out if you don't know anything about them. I do a program with them on a quarterly basis called Onward Ozarks. Don't confuse it with Ozarks at Large. It's at KUAF. It's Onward Ozarks, which is like a webinar that we do. And we most recently did one on the state of healthcare here in Northwest Arkansas and how it's improving because of the Alice Walton School of Medicine being built and created here in Northwest Arkansas and the Whole Health Institute and all the other factors that play into building a region that can sustain the growth that we're about to experience. We're going to be 1 million people by 2050. It might happen before that. We're about 590,000 right now. We're on our way to 1 million. It's amazing how fast this area is growing, but the Northwest Arkansas Council is keeping us honest around that. I want to mention the folks at KUAF. I'm actually in the studio here at KUAF. I'm recording in the Furman Garner Performance Studio, and I want to thank Kyle Kellums and Matthew Moore and obviously the new general manager, Clint Schaff. You guys are doing an amazing job. Jasper, Ryan, Sophia, Rachel, there's such an amazing team here. Emerson, there's just amazing folks here at KUAF Studios. I really want to encourage you guys, please support local public radio. These guys at KUAF do an amazing job, and you can always hear the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast on Ozarks at Large every Tuesday for the most part. Sometimes it'll be Wednesday, but normally it's every Tuesday. Our episodes come out on Monday. You can hear an excerpt from that episode on typically the Tuesday episode of Ozarks at Large. And Matthew and Kyle are kind enough to fit me into the rotation there and share a little bit about some of the stories that we're telling here on the podcast. And so I really want to encourage you to continue to support local public radio. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Gary Head, Tori Bogner, and the rest of the amazing team at Signature Bank and Bonko C. And they have supported this podcast almost since its inception. I have been working, and here's the other thing, folks. If I tell you about a place, it's because I've been there. If I tell you about a restaurant, it's because I've eaten the food. If I tell you about a chef, it's because I know them. If I tell you about a place to shop and get your food, it's because I know the place. I don't recommend things that I don't use myself. I talk about Signature Bank all the time. I talk about the importance of having a good, strong community bank in your community. I know there are others. Believe me, I get that. And they're all great. Signature Bank is special. And they're special for a number of reasons. But if you go back to, I want to say it's episode 4, Gary Head tells the story of why he started Signature Bank and just the evolution of that. And I think that epitomizes the entrepreneurial spirit here in Northwest Arkansas. And so I would encourage you to check it out. If you don't have a bank home, consider going to Signature Bank. And if you have friends and or family member that are Spanish-only speakers, Banco C is the first multilingual bank in the state of Arkansas. It's both English. You can get your documents in Spanish as well, because some people don't read, or the translations, the things are lost in translation in English. So Banco C can serve both needs. And the other thing that's nice about Signature is they cover everything. They're in Fayetteville. They're in 2 areas of Springdale, both over by Harbor and then right downtown Springdale. They're in Rogers. They're in Bentonville. They're in 2 locations in Rogers, over by Pinnacle, and then the location downtown Rogers. And then they've got that location in Bentonville. Signature Bank has got you covered in Northwest Arkansas. And I'm always going to encourage you, even if they stop being a supporter of this podcast, which I hope that doesn't happen. But if it does, I'm still going to bank there, because I've always believed in a strong banking relationship and how that can help you out in so many different ways, whether you're a business owner, whether you are just an individual that needs a mortgage. Listen, your local community banker can serve you well. And I have to say that the folks at Signature Bank and Banco C definitely do a great job of that. Thank you so much to them. I want to thank all the listeners who have shared, listened, and supported the podcast. I recognize and I appreciate all of you for the encouragement that I get from you, for the encouraging notes that I get, for the emails. Thank you so much. And I especially want to thank my team, Caroline Baker, who is my assistant. I thank Jerson Obial, who is my editor. And also I want to thank my wife, Nicola, because without you, honey, I couldn't get a lot of that artwork done for the podcast. So thank you for just being in my corner at all times and answering the call both on Slack and via WhatsApp at all hours of the day. So I really appreciate you guys. I mean, without you, I could not get this podcast done. And then certainly I want to just encourage you. I got to lift up my boys and thank Joshua, Nathan, and Aiden. They are my why, right? Simon Sinek says start with why. So whenever I think about why I do the things I do, this podcast, speak at events, host events like ULI, NWA Place Summit, and so many other things that I do in this community, and you see me around the community, I'm doing it for them. And they are my why. My wife and my boys, Joshua, Nathan, and Aiden, are my why. And I will continue to support them as long as I draw breath. And yeah, they are important to me. And then I just there's a couple of folks that I want to acknowledge, and then I'm going to close this out because I know you're ready to get back to your eggnog. I want to thank Karen Wagaman from the Rogers Lowell Chamber of Commerce. Karen has been personally responsible for delivering up maybe 20 people that have been guests on this podcast. She is just amazing when it comes to connecting the dots. She is a natural relationship builder and a natural connector. She holds the key to all good things happening for local businesses here in Northwest Arkansas through the Rogers Lowell Chamber of Commerce. No shade against any of the other chambers of commerce. They're all great. Rogers Lowell is special. If you're thinking about joining a chamber of commerce, I would encourage you to check them out. I live in Fayetteville. I work in Fayetteville. I'm a member of the Rogers Lowell Chamber of Commerce. That tells you something. I also want to give a shout out to Daimara Baker. And Daimara, actually it's Daimara, but Daimara is an amazing individual that I just met because of my good friend Mark Zweig, who I love dearly. He's the reason why I moved here to Northwest Arkansas. But he introduced me to her a couple of years ago, and then my wife and I became really good friends with Daimara. And Damara has just been great. She's with AFIC now at the University of Arkansas, and they're about to do some amazing things in Springdale. And so hopefully we will have them on the podcast soon to talk about AFIC and the work that they're going to be doing around food in Northwest Arkansas. There's so many good things coming down the pike. I cannot wait to talk more about them. I also want to give a shout out to Megan Brown and Wes Craiglow. Wes is the executive director of Urban Land Institute of Northwest Arkansas, and Megan is his number 2. She's really a number 1, but she is his number 2 technically, but she's amazing, and she runs that whole Place Summit. They have an amazing team, Alex and Candy and the rest of the volunteers that work with ULI NWA do amazing work, and they are ensuring that when it comes to placemaking in Northwest Arkansas, that we are doing things and we're having the conversations that we need to have as we continue to grow, so that we don't look back in 2050 and say, man, we didn't plan properly for the growth and the sprawl that we're experiencing here in Northwest Arkansas. And there are so many lessons to be learned from other fully built cities around the country that can be utilized as we grow Northwest Arkansas. And ULI NWA is doing a great job of that. And hopefully we'll have more engagement with them. And we actually have a couple of special episodes coming up that we'll share with our audience from the Place Summit, and just some great ideas coming out of what placemaking really is. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a few other friends. Ben Clark from Be Unlimited. I got to go on a mission trip with Ben Clark to Uganda this year to work with and spend time with Ugandan businessmen. And it was amazing. And I appreciate Ben Clark from the bottom of my heart. He's been on this podcast as well, telling his story and what he did to create Be Unlimited and really to take over Be Unlimited and grow it to where it is today. They've been an Inc. 5000 company, and they've had a tremendous amount of success. And I want to thank Henry Ho from Field Agent. Henry is a friend, and I've met both Henry and Ben around the same time. And Henry's been just a dear individual in this community, one of the hardest working people that I know, and a great salesman. And he's doing amazing things, and he's introduced me to so many people here in Northwest Arkansas, and I really appreciate him. Also want to shout out one of my newer friends, David Roth, and David and I also went on this trip to Uganda, but I really appreciate David. He is an amazing, well-connected individual, knows everybody here in Northwest Arkansas, and has become an avowed listener of the podcast. And so, David, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you sharing this podcast with as many people as will listen. And hey, man, keep doing what you're doing. And I know the next time I go somewhere and I find some black beads, I'm going to get them for you. And I will personally hand deliver them to you. And then, of course, I just mentioned him before, but Mark Zweig, again, folks, if any of you really appreciate me and appreciate what I'm doing with the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast, the person you really want to thank is Mark Zweig. He's the reason why I'm here. And Mark and I have been friends. He hired me back in 97 when I was just a child. And we've been friends ever since. And actually, I call him my big brother from another mother, but he's a great guy. He and his wife, Sonia. And I remember his daughters when they were children, and now they're full-blown adults with their own businesses and children of their own and everything. And I really appreciate Mark. I appreciate the whole Zweig Group team, the folks that I actually originally moved here to work with. I don't work there anymore technically. I consult with them. But I appreciate those guys, Chad Kleinens, Chad Coldiron, who's actually been on the podcast, Melina Urso, who works at Zweig Group, is also the owner of Big Box Karaoke, who's also been on the podcast. Anyway, there's just the interconnectedness of Northwest Arkansas is actually beautiful in my mind. And I love the way that how community is represented that way. So anyway, I really appreciate that. And then last but not least, I want to say that I really appreciate the folks at Ozark Natural Foods, especially my co-board members and my man, the general manager, Dennis Hanley, and the rest of the Ozark Natural Foods team, Anne Marie, Lisa, all of you, Alicia, all of you guys are simply amazing. And you have taken something and you've taken what at one point in time, for a very brief moment, was lemons and has turned it into true lemonade. And like I said before, Ozark Natural Foods is the only food co-op in the state of Arkansas, and we offer up more than 100. We offer a place for more than 100 local providers to house and sell their goods and services. And so really want to encourage you to check out and support Ozark Natural Foods. And man, I could go on and on, but I think you guys get the idea. I think 2025 is going to be an amazing year. It's going to be the year of the producer. It's going to be the year of the creator. I know AI is definitely going to play a part in that. I use AI all the time. I use AI for my show notes. I use AI to create transcripts. You'd be surprised. AI has so many benefits. Don't be afraid of AI. Embrace it. I spend like an hour a day learning about AI because, listen, folks, I'm here to tell you, if you haven't read the memo, AI is coming whether you like it or not. So you might as well just jump in the water. It's a little chilly right now, but trust me, it's going to get warmer. There's going to become more understanding, and you'll figure out how AI plays a role in your life. And it's not to take away any of your creativity, because the creativity that you have is what God gave you, not some computer. I'll say that again if you want me to. The creativity that you have on the inside is what God gave you. It's not from some computer. But if you have the right computer, if you have the right artificial intelligence and access to the right programs, you can allow things to be augmented, to be enhanced, to be, I see it as additive and not something to take away. And you could argue with me. It's fine. I don't have any dog in the fight. I wish I had some OpenAI stock. I don't. Sam Altman, hit your boy up if you want to hook me up with some personal shares. I'd appreciate it. But seriously, though, AI is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So you might as well figure out, how do I make my life simpler? In my mind, I'm trying to reclaim some time by utilizing AI. And that might be one of the simplest ways that you can look at it. But this is not an AI conversation, but I just thought I would mention that. That's really all I have to share with you guys. I wanted to do a simple monologue just to kind of recap this year. I didn't mention every episode that was on the podcast. We had 52 of them, and it would be hard for me to do that, including some of the bonus episodes. Just know it when I say it, that I really appreciate each and every one of you that has been able to be on the podcast, that has listened to the podcast, that has supported the podcast. We've got some really big plans for 2025, and so I hope you stay tuned. We may even be doing a daily, very short show each week on the podcast, a daily episode, which would just be a real small snippet. I'm not 100% certain, but I'm working on some things in the lab, and so stay tuned for that. And I also want to give a shout out to the folks at NWA Daily. They serve as inspiration for me as well. We've kind of grown up along the same timeline, and to me, it's one of the most comprehensive daily newsletters here in Northwest Arkansas. If you want to know what's happening, you need to subscribe to the NWA Daily. We'll put a link in the show notes for them as well. If you're not already subscribed, you need to subscribe to them. And if you're not already subscribing and or following the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast on your favorite podcasting platform, you need to consider doing that. So check that out as well. And I guess that's about it. I just want to encourage you to be thinking about this season, and make sure you take some time for yourself. Take some time and spend it with family. Maybe try to take a day where you don't spend any money whatsoever, right? You just exist. Sometimes we need to do that as a reminder that we're all human, and we sometimes need to reflect in that way. But I really want to encourage you to do that. And this Advent season it's special. I know there's a lot of unknowns for 2025, but I think if we all collectively work together, we can ultimately be the change that we so desperately seek. So that's all I have for you this week on this episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. This was probably my longest monologue ever, outside of the one this is the longest monologue that I've done. So that's right. That's all I have to share. And I really appreciate you guys so much. I wish you nothing but a happy holiday season, Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah, and then certainly a Happy New Year. Everybody get into the new year safe and sound, and I will see you on the other side in 2025. We have a best of episode next week for our final episode of the year, and then in 2025, we've got some great stuff on tap, so I think you're going to enjoy it. So please continue tuning in to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. I'm Randy Wilburn, the host, and I hope I'm your friend, or at least you think of me as a friend, and we'll see you soon. And always feel free to reach out to hello@iamnorthwestarkansas.com with any comments or any thoughts or any ideas. We're always open to them. And if you're looking to collaborate with me, hit your boy up. You'd be surprised. I'm open to a lot of things in 2025. So we'll see how it goes. Never going to water down the product. So the podcast is always going to be what it is. But we're going to do some really cool things in 2025. So stay tuned. Be safe. And I love all of you guys. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit iamnorthwestarkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.